Till now, what we've done is we've done what the 5 kingdoms of classification in the living world are. And we know the 5 kingdoms are Monera, we have Protista, Fungi, and then we have 2 major kingdoms. The Kingdom Plantae, which is basically the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom, which is also known as Kingdom Animalia. So in the previous videos, we've already covered the first 3. These 2 are major ones, so we'll be requiring at least 1 video for each. So let's get started with what is the plant kingdom. Now, not every species of plant is going to be classified into only one thing, that is, it's a plant. There are certain subcategories and sub-subcategories and many types and classes, and lots of classification is there. So this plant kingdom is usually studied in the form of 5 different groups. First one is algae. The second one is bryophytes. The third one is pteridophytes. The fourth one is angiosperms, and we'll be dealing with the classification of angiosperms too in much more detail. And the fifth and last is gymnosperms. Now, lots of factors are there why a certain plant species is put into one of these categories. It could be the way the plant looks, its organization, the method of getting food. Well, most of the plants are autotrophic. They make their own food. And the pigment that helps them in making their own food is called chlorophyll. And it contains those elements that give plants their green color. Okay, and that is the common, let's say, the common factor in all of them. Apart from that, how do they get their nutrients? What is the process by which they make their own food? How do they reproduce? All these are the different factors that affect whether a plant species will be put into algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, angiosperms, or gymnosperms. What will be, being focused on right now is going to be algae. So what exactly is algae? Algae is that greenish carpety thing that you often observe on moist places. So one thing that it needs to grow is definitely moisture. It can even grow in the form of kelps on the surface of water. Right, so algae can have lots of different forms. It can be existing in the form of one single cell also. For example, Chlamydomonas is there. Alright, so that can be in form of one cell, or it can be in the form of colonies. For example, volvox. Or it can be in the form of filaments with their DNA wrapped like a helix over here. For example, Spirogyra. These are the basic 3 types. This is Chlamydomonas. The spellings are a little shaky over here. Chlamydomonas. So these are the 3 rough shapes or forms in which you can find algae, and they can be found in both marine and freshwater habitats. And they can even coexist with other plants. For example, lichens, which is a fungus, can also coexist with some animals, for example, the sloth bear. So that is about the way these are differentiated on the kinds of cells that they're made up of, or in how many groups do they live. So the next thing that we have to do important about algae is the way they reproduce. So reproduction in algae is of 2 types, just like in any other organism. It can be sexual through spores. Those spores are known as zoospores specifically. Sorry, this is asexual. It happens through zoospores, or it can be sexual. That happens through the fusion of the male and the female gametes. Fusion of gametes. Usually these gametes, they have a flagella. That means they're motile, they can move. Sometimes they may not be flagellated as well. The fusion of 2 gametes that are dissimilar is known as anisogamous. that is in case of dissimilar, and if they are similar to each other, it's called isogamous. And how do you know whether it's similar or not? It's due to the presence of the flagella or the absence of it, as well as the size. The fusion between one large non-motile gamete, usually it's a female, and one smaller motile gamete, which is a male, that is called oogamous. Let's take a few examples. Oogamous takes place in volvox. That is the example for this. Isogamous takes place in Spirogyra, which, if you remember, is the filamentous kind of algae. And anisogamous is there in Chlamydomonas. So that is how the reproduction takes place. Now, algae are useful to human beings in a lot of ways. In lots of cases, they help in fixation of carbon, that is carbon dioxide fixation. That is one of the advantages. Additionally, lots of commercial uses are there. For instance, many kinds of species of Porphyra are used as food by human beings. Alright, then there are some other kinds also, like the brown algae and the red algae. They produce large amounts of hydrocolloids. That means water holding substances. So example of that is the red algae and the brown algae. So from that you can get materials like agar, that is used in preparation of lots of jellies and ice creams. And then there is an algae called chlorella. It's used as a food supplement, even by space travelers. So people who go to outer space, the astronauts, they may find this in their food. It's used in space travel a lot. And the next thing that we are going to do is the classification of the algae further into different groups. So the algae that we are going to do is going to be of three major groups. The first one is called Chlorophyceae. The second one is Phaeophyceae. And the third one is Rhodophyceae. Now, beginning with Chlorophyceae, why they're called Chlorophyceae is because they have chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is stored in small intracellular bodies known as chloroplasts. Alright, and it's also known as green algae commonly. As you can guess, it's from the green color that they get. So green algae is nothing but Chlorophyceae. And there's a lot of dominance of this pigment chlorophyll both in the form A as well as B. And all of the pigments are present in definite chloroplasts. They can be in any kind of shape. They can be in the shape of ribbons or like plates or like cups or spirals. Most of the members of this particular group also have one more substance called pyrenoids. These are basically storage devices in the cells of these algae, and they have lots of other things like protein and starch. Some kinds of algae can also store food in the form of oil droplets. So it can be starch, it can be protein, it can be oil. Any of these. And usually green algae have a very rigid cell wall, an inner layer of cellulose and outer layer of pectose is there. So cellulose pectose layer is there. And the reproduction is usually through asexual means, and there are flagellated zoospores that are used in the asexual reproduction, and they are produced in zoosporangia. So that is the place where these spores get produced. Sexual reproduction is quite varied, and it can be isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. And some of the common green algae are volvox and Spirogyra. So this is about the Chlorophyceae. Now, Phaeophyceae are commonly known as the brown algae. It's not that they don't have chlorophyll, they have the pigments chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, but apart from chlorophyll, they also have two more pigments, that is carotenoids let me write that spelling down again, and xanthophylls. Now these are usually found in marine water, and the important thing is their shape. It can be simple branched, it can be filamentous also, and sometimes, for example, in the case of kelps, they can even reach a length of 100 meters. That means excessively branched. Alright, so that would be what a kelp will be. Branches and then sub-branches, and lots of variations are found in their color as well. It could be from olive green to various shades of brown depending on the quantities present of chlorophyll and these two other pigments. Food in case of Phycophyceae is usually stored in the form of carbohydrates, and usually two kinds of carbohydrates are found in them. One is laminarium and the other one is mannitol. Right, so one is laminarin, it's not larium, it's laminarin and mannitol. And the vegetative cells, they have a very rigid cellulose wall as well that is covered on the outside by a coating of algin. So algin coating is there on the outside of their cell walls. Now the plant body has a few important features. What happens is it is having a holdfast, which basically attaches it to the strata on which it is there. Then it has a stalk, then it has a stipe, and finally the frond, which is basically the leaf-like organ which is there, that is photosynthetic in nature and that makes the foods. So vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation, and in most of these brown algae it's by zoospores that have two flagella. So let's suppose this is the zoospore, it's going to have two flagella, it's called biflagellate. Usually they are pear-shaped and have two unequal laterally attached flagella. So one is going to be longer and the other one is going to be shorter. So sexual reproduction can be isogamous, where the gametes are matching each other, they're quite similar. It can be anisogamous, it can even be oogamous. Now the union of the gametes, the fusion can take place within the oogonium in case of oogamous species, or it can take place in the water outside the organisms. The common forms of brown algae are laminaria and fucus. So the next thing that we have to do is the third kind of algae, which is Rhodophyceae. So Rhodophyceae are commonly known as red algae because the pigment that is present in them, it makes it red, and that pigment is r-phycoerythrin. That is the pigment that makes it red, and usually they are marine in their nature, in their habitat. Lots of them are found in the warmer areas as well. Now the red part of most of the red algae are quite multicellular. Very rarely you're going to find a red algae that is single cellular. Most of them will have a complex body organization. The food is going to be stored in the form of Floridian starch, which is very similar to amylopectin and glycogen in the structure. The vegetative reproduction is usually by fragmentation, and asexual is by spores. Those spores are non-motile, and sometimes the sexual reproduction can also take place by the non-motile gametes. Sexual reproduction in this case is always going to be oogamous, and lots of post-fertilization developments exist, so that is a complex process. The common members of this particular kind of algae are Gelidium and Porphyra. So that is the red algae. So far we have done these three kinds of algae. Let's just summarize them once again. So basically we did three groups, which is Chlorophyceae, which is known as green algae because presence of the green pigment chlorophyll. Then we have Phaeophyceae, which is known as brown algae because of presence of different pigments. And then we have Rhodophyceae. Now Chlorophyceae is green because of chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Phaeophyces are known as brown algae because they have chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fucoxanthin, along with sometimes other carotenoids also that give a reddish brown tinge. And Rhodophyceae are known as red algae because they have chlorophyll A, chlorophyll D, and r-phycoerythrin, which is more dominant. That's why they're not so green as they are red in color. Now the food that is stored in them is in this form. In Chlorophyceae, it's in the form of starch. In Phaeophyceae, it's in the form of mannitol and laminarin. And food in Rhodophyceae is in the form of Floridian starch. Coming to the cell wall. Cell wall in the Chlorophyceae is made up of cellulose. In case of Phaeophyceae, it is cellulose with a layer of algae on the outside. And in case of Rhodophyceae, cellulose, pectin, and polysulfate esters as well. So apart from this, the information about the flagella. In case of Chlorophyceae, about 2 to 8 of them are there. They are equal in length. In case of Phaeophyceae, about 2 of them that are going to be unequal, and Rhodophyceae don't have any flagella at all. And the kind of habitat that they like to live in. Chlorophyceae, it can be fresh water, brackish water, salt water, so basically any kind of habitat. Phaeophyceae very rarely in fresh water, but they can exist, and plus salt water, so in other words any habitat. Rhodophyceae, some are there in fresh water, but usually in salt water. So that is a general summary of the 3 kinds of algae that we have discussed so far. So the next group that we have to discuss after algae is bryophytes. So we'll be doing that in the next video, and keep revising this information on algae, and thank you so much for watching this video.